What's going on, everybody? Brett here, and we're back on my YouTube channel, Good Talk Gaming, playing some more Total War Warhammer 2. Today's episode is going to take place on the amazing map, the Black Pyramid. Going to be me playing as the Dwarves once again against my buddy Triiari playing the High Elves. He is definitely a lover of the Elf factions, and he had a build that he thought was kind of a quintessential anti-dwarf build. And I said, you know what? Let me test out what I believe to be kind of the great basis for any dwarf build against any race, really. And this map kind of wasn't cooperating with my plans, but it ends up being okay. And let's go ahead. Actually, not that complicated. Let me go ahead and just put it in fast forward or standard speed for a moment as we advance towards each other. So, guys, if you've ever spent any time playing on a ladder as the dwarves, I've seen this build get pretty much auto-picked against me plenty of times. It's a good mix for the High Elves of, you'll see here the Pure Main Company, the White Lions, and Sword Masters of Hoeth. And people pick these because they have excellent armor piercing and missile resistance. And that's pretty much all you need to get past the Dwarves' front line. You'll also see two groups here of the Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers. Wow, and I just kind of flattened those guys with the Goblobber. But they're going to advance, and they're already under fire as soon as the battle starts from my cannons and my Goblobber. But they're here to snipe artillery, but I didn't just take one or two pieces. I took an overwhelming number of artillery pieces. So we're going to focus down these Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers, because believe me, I know just how much work they can do if left unimpeded. So the Goblobber is going to be applying a leadership debuff, while the cannons are able to snipe down individual artillery pieces. The Lord choice here is going to be Alariel the Radiant on foot, much cheaper than if she were on her, Great Eagle mount. But she's going to be looking to heal up these very expensive infantry units, and good tactics from Triiari, going up and around, using the terrain to his advantage to block a lot of any missile fire that we might have. But at this point, my Rangers, who I think of which I have 6, I sure do, they're still invisible, they're still hidden. And I'm going to be taking advantage of these little alleys as well to form defensive squares, putting my Longbeards, who are definitely the sturdier of my infantry, into these gaps and trying to close them off. But the Sword Masters of Hoeth are more than a match for Longbeards. They'll absolutely just destroy them. So I'm going to have to do my best to keep this battle localized to this area and away from my artillery. Looks like a spell's going off here. Rune of Wrath and Ruin going down on the Sword Masters. He detached the Pure Main Company on this side and the Sword Masters of Hoeth to come around here and try and get into the back. But I have another group of Longbeards, 2 Rangers, and a Runesmith that are going to be focus firing the Pure Main Company down, and using another Rune of Wrath and Ruin as well. And we're going to try and focus. Focus fire here, I think, is the key. One of the groups of Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers is offline, and the other is getting focused down heavily now as well. So I'm detaching a lot of my, resources that were devoted to this kind of middle, open, wide area, and I'm bringing them off to the side because that's what my opponent's doing. You need to be very fluid as the Dwarves, and you need to make decisions quickly because they're so slow that if you hesitate too much, you're not going to be able to mirror your opponent's movements in an effective way. So a great heal going down, Earthblood plus the Star of Avalorn, and Verona's Time Warp also trying to buff them from this Mage Galore of Light. However, we were able to break them right before they were getting all that healing, so it ended up not being quite as effective. And you'll see here my cannons, 3 cannons in all, and the Goblobber, as I've said, and they're going to be turning to put a lot of this fire into these grouped up, blobbed up infantry units. My Rangers, the great thing about Rangers, and the reason that I love them, aside from them being so dang cheap, is that they double as basic infantry units in a pinch. And if I have to sacrifice a group of Rangers to hold up 2 groups of White Lions, then I certainly will. And meanwhile, because they're in guard mode, they're going to continue firing at the Sword Masters of Hoeth. My Dwarf Lord, as basic as it gets, all he has is stand your ground. And that's going to allow my Longbeards, my Dwarf Warriors, to stand and fight against far superior units. And my Runesmith also has all 3 of his runes. Rune of Negation for damage resistance, as well as the rune that grants a lot of armor in an AoE. So the Dwarf Warriors come in just in time to try and contest these White Lions. And it's a bit of a mismatch, but once white lines drop below 50% HP, that goes for all high elf units. They lose a ton of their combat effectiveness, their martial prowess, as it's referred. So a neat trick when you're fighting the high elves, if you want to absolutely wreck them, you focus them down to about 50% of their HP, and then you switch targets. There's no reason to take them down below 50% HP. If you can get them on the engagement with your ranged units right before they are able to meet with your front lines, and you can take down multiple of their units to sub 50% HP. At the time that they clash, they'll have so much less stats to work with that even your weaker dwarf warriors will be able to stand and fight. So Rune of Negation, keeping my units fighting. Swordmasters of Hoeth, 44 units, absolutely tearing up my Longbeards, those poor guys. But they do stand and fight to the last man, as most dwarf units tend to do. But just tons of volume of fire coming in. Wow, cannonballs ripping through. I was very worried about this position, by the way. Once I saw that Triiari had decided to take this route, not much high ground, not much visibility for cannons. You'll see all of this terrain kind of blocking my view in a lot of angles, and I was worried. Ultimately here, though, our Longbeards held just long enough for our Rangers to shoot almost all of their ammunition. The Runesmith took a ton of damage, but ultimately tanked very well for us. Yeah, Triiari's doing everything he can to try and keep these units in the battle, but a lot of times as soon as he gets into those desperate fights where he sees an excellent target for the Star of Avalor, we managed to rout his units, and that was a bit of a whiff, unfortunately. Kind of lucky for me, because Swordmasters of Hoeth being healed aggressively in a pit fight against units that they're quite superior against, the Rangers really would not have had a chance. Longbeards constantly on the verge of routing, but they do have an encouragement aura that keeps them in the fight, and our Dwarf Warrior has been, our Dwarf Lord I should say, has been basically untouched. Ilario is not enough of a duelist to get through the super heavy armor of a Dwarf Lord, and especially one that's being constantly supported by an ever-rotating set of runes. And you'll see here also I had the Mage of Light surrounded. So great job from Triiari. I think he used the map to his advantage. I think his build was absolutely sound, but my overwhelming artillery fire made it so that, you know, the E-Call bolt throwers never really got online. They never really found a home. His units, as soon as they engaged, I was very strategic in my targeting with my Rangers, taking them down to about 50% HP on each model before switching to the next. And I used my Longbeards in a bit of a sacrificial way, using them as my tankiest unit with the support of a Runesmith and a Dwarf Lord to hold those gaps long enough to, you know, screen with my Dwarf Warriors and really rely on my Rangers and artillery to do that DPS that I needed them to do. Honestly, I don't know if there's anything Triiari could have done differently. On a different map even, I think I would have had even more of an advantage than I already did. This battle could have been easily decided in the front line. Maybe not detaching the Pure Main Company and one of the Swordmasters of Hoeth. It allowed me to allocate just a few resources, one Longbeard, 2 Rangers, and a Runesmith to shut them down. These two together are some extremely expensive units. But my overall strategy with the Dwarves is to go wide. Go as wide as possible. Try and get as near to 20 unit models as you can. And depending on which races I'm facing, it really determines how many Rangers I take, how many artillery pieces I take, and things like that. You'll see here, I mean, 6 infantry units is not a lot. I'm really relying on my Runesmiths, my Dwarf Lord, to catch anything that's trying to get past me. And I'm also relying on the Rangers' ability to stand and fight really weak units, at least for a little while. If I was fighting vampire counts, let's say, I would be focusing down high priority targets with my cannons, using the Goblobber to, you know, shut down grouped infantry. The Rangers would be capable of fighting off zombies that have been summoned on top of them, and they would also be great spread out, dealing damage to flyers or, you know, what have you, while the front line held just long enough to allow them to shoot all of their ammunition and to deal that damage. And that's the general idea behind this build. And sometimes the Goblobber is great. Sometimes, you know, maybe you want to cut it for 2 miners or something like that and really round out your build, give you enough protection for your cannons. It just depends on what you're facing. But guys, anyway, that's it for me today. Once again, my name is Brett. My channel is Good Talk Gaming. I hope you enjoyed this look at my Dwarven build that I feel like is kind of the standard, my standard go-to build. I'm not going to claim that it's the build, but whenever I want to win as the Dwarves, this is the template that I use. And I think Triiari's build for the High Elves is definitely a good template for winning against the Dwarves. You just may need to tweak it depending on your play style. So, without any further ado, guys, I will see you in the next one. Take care.